The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop 3 days early, nearly throwing Sophia Northwood through the frosted window, as the driver shouted warnings about the worst blizzard to hit Springerville, Arizona in 20 years. She pressed her gloved hands against the ice-covered glass, peering through the swirling white chaos at what was supposed to be her new home. This was not how she had imagined arriving to meet Owen Crawford, the rancher who had answered her advertisement for a mail-order bride. The letters they had exchanged over the past 4 months painted pictures of warm Arizona sunshine, cattle grazing on golden grasslands, and a man who wrote with surprising tenderness about his lonely life on the frontier. Nobody had mentioned blizzards in Arizona, though she supposed the high elevation of this mountain town made such weather possible, even if rare. "Miss, you cannot stay in this coach." The driver yanked open the door, letting in a blast of frigid air that stole her breath. "I've got to get these horses to shelter before they freeze. The nearest building is just there. See that light? Run for it now." Sophia gathered her carpet bag and what dignity she could muster in her traveling dress and thin coat. She had sold nearly everything she owned back in Boston to afford the journey west, keeping only her most practical possessions and her mother's silver locket. The rest of her belongings were in a trunk that was supposed to arrive with her in 3 more days, when Owen Crawford would be waiting at the station with his wagon, ready to meet his bride. Instead, she stumbled through knee-deep snow toward a flickering lantern that marked the entrance to what appeared to be a saloon. Her fashionable Boston boots were utterly useless against the elements, and within seconds her feet had gone numb. The wind howled like a living thing, pushing her sideways as she fought toward that golden light. Just when she thought she might collapse into the snow and simply disappear, strong hands grabbed her shoulders and pulled her forward. "I've got you. Keep moving." The voice was deep and rough, commanding without being harsh. Sophia could barely see the man through the snow caking her eyelashes, but she let him guide her up wooden steps and through a door that slammed shut behind them with blessed finality. The sudden warmth of the saloon made her skin prickle painfully, as sensation returned to her frozen extremities. She stood dripping on the rough wooden floor, aware that she must look like a half-drowned cat, while the man who had rescued her brushed snow from his own broad shoulders. When he turned to face her, removing his hat to reveal dark hair and eyes the color of strong coffee, Sophia felt her heart perform an uncomfortable flip in her chest. "You all right, miss?" He studied her with concern, his weathered face suggesting a man in his late 20s who spent most of his time outdoors. "That was damn foolish of Jenkins to dump you out in this storm. He said the horses needed shelter." Sophia managed through chattering teeth. "I am supposed to be meeting someone, but not for 3 more days. Owen Crawford, do you know him?" Something shifted in the man's expression, a mixture of surprise and something else she could not quite identify. "I know him. Could you possibly take me to him?" "I know I am early, terribly early, but I have nowhere else to go, and surely he would not turn away his intended bride just because she arrived ahead of schedule." The words tumbled out in a rush as she realized how completely dependent she was on the kindness of strangers in this wild place. The man studied her for a long moment, his jaw working as if considering something difficult. Around them, the saloon was nearly empty due to the storm, just a bartender polishing glasses and 2 old men playing cards in the corner. A pot-bellied stove radiated heat that Sophia wanted to wrap herself around like a blanket. "Miss, I am Owen Crawford," he said finally, his voice careful, "and you are right on time." Sophia blinked at him, certain she had misheard over the roar of the storm outside. "You are Owen?" "Yes, madam." "And you must be Sophia Northwood from Boston." He twisted his hat in his hands, looking suddenly uncertain in a way that softened his rugged features. "I was not expecting you until Thursday, but I meant what I said. You are right on time, because I have been waiting for you a lot longer than 4 months." The sincerity in his voice made something warm unfurl in Sophia's chest, chasing away the cold more effectively than the stove ever could. She had spent the entire journey west worrying that Owen would take one look at her plain face and red hair and decide he had made a terrible mistake. Instead, he was looking at her like she was the answer to a prayer he had been too afraid to speak aloud. "I must look absolutely dreadful," she said, suddenly aware of her soaked clothing and the puddle forming around her feet. "You look like someone who just survived a blizzard, which makes you about the toughest thing I have seen all week." Owen's mouth quirked into a smile that transformed his entire face. "Come on, let us get you somewhere proper. My ranch is 2 miles out of town, impossible to reach in this weather, but I keep a room at the boarding house for nights when I am too tired or too drunk to ride home. Tonight it is yours. But where will you stay? I will figure something out. Right now, getting you warm and dry is what matters." He turned to the bartender. "Charlie, if anyone asks, Miss Northwood is here under my protection until this storm passes." Charlie nodded solemnly. "Understood, Owen. Miss, welcome to Springerville. Sorry about the weather. This is unusual even for us mountain folk." Owen retrieved his hat and coat, then offered Sophia his arm. "The boarding house is just next door, but we will still get plenty wet. Ready?" Sophia placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength of him even through layers of fabric. "Ready." The journey next door was mercifully brief, but still brutal. The snow had deepened even in the few minutes she had been inside, and the wind seemed determined to tear them apart. Owen kept his body between her and the worst of the blast, hunching his shoulders to create a barrier. When they stumbled up the steps of the boarding house, he pounded on the door until a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a suspicious frown opened it. "Owen Crawford, what in heaven's name are you doing out in this mess? And who is this poor girl?" "Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Sophia Northwood. She was supposed to arrive on Thursday to become my wife, but the storm brought her in early. She needs a room, hot water for a bath, and probably some supper if you have any to spare." Mrs. Patterson's expression transformed from suspicious to delighted in an instant. "Your mail-order bride." "Oh, how wonderful. Come in, both of you. Miss Northwood, you poor dear, you are frozen solid. Owen, stop hovering in the doorway and help me get her upstairs." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Patterson bustled around preparing a bath, while Owen carried bucket after bucket of hot water up the stairs, politely averting his eyes from Sophia's shivering form. The boarding house keeper provided a worn but clean nightgown and wrapper, then shooed Owen away so Sophia could bathe in private. Sinking into the hot water was like entering heaven. Sophia let out an involuntary moan of relief as warmth seeped back into her bones, finally allowing her to fully process everything that had happened. She was in Arizona, in the middle of a historic blizzard, and she had already met the man who was supposed to become her husband. Owen Crawford was nothing like she had imagined, and yet somehow exactly right. His letters had suggested a thoughtful, lonely man who was ready to build a life with someone. In person, he radiated quiet strength and a gentleness that made her feel safe despite being thousands of miles from everything familiar. The physical attraction she felt was an unexpected complication. His letters had included no photograph, so she had tried not to build up expectations about his appearance. But Owen was handsome in a rugged, masculine way that made her pulse quicken. The way he had looked at her, like she was something precious that had been delivered into his keeping, made her wonder if perhaps this arrangement might become something more than a practical partnership. When she finally emerged from the bath, wrapped in the borrowed clothes with her red hair hanging in damp waves down her back, she found Mrs. Patterson had laid out a supper tray, and Owen was sitting in a chair by the door, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I thought you might want some company for supper," he said, standing quickly. "But if you would rather rest alone, I completely understand. This has been an overwhelming day." "Please stay," Sophia said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I would like to talk with you properly. Our letters told me much, but there is something different about speaking face to face." Owen relaxed slightly and pulled his chair closer to the small table where Mrs. Patterson had set the food. There was beef stew, fresh bread, and even a slice of apple pie. Sophia's stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she had not eaten since dawn. "Tell me about your ranch," she said between bites. "Your letters mentioned cattle, but I know nothing about that life. I grew up in Boston, and my father was a clerk. After he died, I worked as a seamstress until I realized there was no real future there for me." Owen leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "The ranch has been in my family for 15 years now. My father bought the land when I was 12 and we moved out here from Missouri. He died 3 years back, left the place to me. I run about 200 head of cattle, have 4 men who work for me full-time, and another half-dozen who come on during roundup and branding season. It is a good life, but it is hard work and lonely as hell, pardon my language." "I imagine it must be," Sophia said softly. "That is why you decided to advertise for a wife. That is part of it." Owen met her eyes directly. "But I also wanted what my parents had. They loved each other something fierce, and even when times were hard, they faced it together. When my father died, my mother only lasted 6 months after him. Doc said it was pneumonia, but I think she just did not want to be here without him. That is the kind of marriage I want, Miss Northwood. Not just someone to cook and clean, but a real partner, someone to build a life with." The naked honesty in his voice made Sophia's throat tight. "That is what I want too. I will be frank with you, Mr. Crawford. I could have married back in Boston. There were men who showed interest, but they wanted a housekeeper or a mother for their children, not a wife, not a partner. When I saw your advertisement, the way you wrote about wanting to share your life rather than just fill a position, that spoke to me." "Owen," he said. "Please call me Owen. Mr. Crawford makes me sound like my father." "Then you must call me Sophia." They smiled at each other across the small table, and Sophia felt the first threads of real connection forming between them. This was not the passionate, impulsive love she had read about in novels. This was something quieter but potentially more lasting, built on mutual respect and shared hopes. "So what happens now?" she asked. "I know we planned to have a few days to get to know each other before the wedding, but this storm has disrupted everything." Owen rubbed the back of his neck, looking sheepish. "Well, the preacher lives in town, so as soon as this weather clears, we can get married if you are still willing. In the meantime, you will stay here where it is proper and safe. I will bunk down in the saloon or the livery, wherever Charlie will let me spread my bedroll. Once we are married, I will take you home to the ranch. Are you not worried," Sophia blurted out, "that we might not suit each other, that this might be a terrible mistake?" "I have been worried about that every day since I sent my first letter to you," Owen admitted. "But now that you are here, now that I have talked with you and seen that you are real and brave and willing to take a chance on this life, I am not worried anymore. I think we are going to be just fine. Sophia Northwood." The way he said her name, with a rough tenderness that made it sound like something precious, sent warmth flooding through her chest. "I think so too." They talked long into the night while the blizzard raged outside and the rest of the boarding house settled into sleep. Owen told her about the ranch, about the men who worked for him, about the challenges of raising cattle in this high country where the weather could be unpredictable. Sophia shared stories about Boston, about her childhood, about the year after her father died when she had barely scraped by on her seamstress wages. "I am not afraid of hard work," she assured him. "I know ranch life will be difficult, but I am ready for it. I want to be useful, to contribute. I am a good cook and I can sew anything. I can learn the rest." "I do not doubt it," Owen said. "Anyone who has the courage to travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger has the grit to handle ranch life." Finally, when Sophia could barely keep her eyes open, Owen stood to leave. At the door, he hesitated, then turned back. "Sophia, I know this has all happened so fast, too fast really, but I want you to know that I meant what I said earlier. You are right on time. I have been waiting my whole life for someone like you, and I do not care if you showed up 3 days early or 3 weeks late. You are here now, and that is all that matters." Before she could respond, he slipped out into the hallway, closing the door gently behind him. Sophia stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding, then climbed into the narrow bed. Despite the strange room and the howling wind outside, she fell asleep almost instantly, dreaming of open skies and a dark-eyed cowboy who looked at her like she hung the moon. The blizzard lasted 2 full days. Sophia spent the time getting to know Mrs. Patterson and the other residents of the boarding house, while Owen checked on her regularly between his attempts to help dig out various buildings and ensure the townspeople had enough firewood. Each time he appeared at the boarding house, covered in snow and smiling at her like she was the best thing he had seen all day, Sophia felt herself falling a little more. On the evening of the second day, the snow finally stopped and stars emerged in a sky so clear and cold it looked like black glass scattered with diamonds. Owen arrived at the boarding house cleaned up and nervous, his dark hair still damp from washing. "The preacher says he can marry us tomorrow morning if you are ready," he said without preamble. "I know it is fast, and we have barely had time to court properly, but the longer we wait, the more talk there will be about you staying here unmarried. I do not care what people say about me, but I care what they say about you." Sophia looked at this man who had spent 2 days making sure she was comfortable and safe while he slept on a saloon floor, who brought her small gifts of hot coffee and fresh bread whenever he checked on her, who looked at her like she was something miraculous. The practical part of her brain pointed out that they had known each other for only 3 days. The rest of her, the part that had been lonely for so long, simply did not care. "Tomorrow morning sounds perfect," she said. "But Owen, I do not have a proper dress. Everything I own is still in my trunk on that stagecoach, and what I was wearing when I arrived is hardly suitable for a wedding. You could wear a flour sack and still be the prettiest bride this town has ever seen," Owen said with such earnest conviction that Sophia felt her cheeks heat. "But Mrs. Patterson mentioned she might have something you could borrow. She was married in Springerville 30 years ago and kept her dress." The next morning dawned cold and bright, the town transformed into a winter wonderland that would have been beautiful if it were not so inconvenient. Sophia dressed in Mrs. Patterson's carefully preserved blue silk dress, which fit reasonably well with only minor adjustments. The boarding house keeper fussed over her like a mother hen, pinning up her red hair and lending her a cameo brooch for luck. "You are making the right choice, Mrs. Patterson assured her as they prepared to walk to the church. "Owen Crawford is one of the good ones. He has had half the unmarried women in this territory chasing him for years, but he would not settle for just anyone. He was waiting for the right person, and I think that is you, dear." The church was small and drafty, but someone had brought in pine boughs that made the whole space smell like Christmas. Owen stood at the altar in what was clearly his best suit, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. A handful of townspeople had gathered to witness the ceremony, curious about the mail-order bride who had arrived in the middle of a historic blizzard. Sophia walked down the short aisle without anyone to give her away, her head high despite her nerves. When she reached Owen's side, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You look scared," she whispered back. "Terrified," he admitted, "but in a good way." The ceremony was brief and simple. Reverend Thompson spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of commitment, then asked them each to repeat vows that had been spoken by countless couples before them. When Owen said, "I do," his voice was steady and sure. When Sophia said the same, she meant it with her entire heart. "I now pronounce you man and wife. Owen, you may kiss your bride." Owen cupped her face gently with his work-roughened hands and kissed her with such tender reverence that Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. It was her first real kiss, and it tasted like promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, the small crowd burst into applause, and someone shouted congratulations. They spent the afternoon at a modest reception in the saloon, which Charlie had cleaned up and decorated with whatever festive items he could find. The townspeople brought food and well wishes, clearly delighted by the romance of a mail-order bride arriving early in a blizzard. Sophia met so many people her head spun with names and faces, but Owen stayed close by her side, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink, Owen leaned down to murmur in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Crawford, Mrs. Crawford." The name sent a thrill through her. More than ready. The 2-mile journey to the ranch took nearly an hour in the wagon, the horses picking their way carefully through deep snow. Owen had wrapped Sophia in buffalo robes until only her face peeked out, and he kept checking to make sure she was warm enough. The landscape around them was breathtaking, high mountain country where ponderosa pines stood like dark sentinels against the snow. "There," Owen pointed as they crested a rise. "That is home." The ranch house was larger than Sophia had expected, a sturdy log structure with a wide front porch and smoke rising from the chimney. A large barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and she could see cattle clustered in a sheltered valley beyond. It looked solid and permanent, a place where a person could build a real life. "One of my men has been keeping the fires going and looking after the place," Owen explained as he helped her down from the wagon. "I sent word that I would be bringing you home today, so the house should be warm and there ought to be supper waiting." Inside, the ranch house was simple but comfortable. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a worn sofa, a dining table, and a kitchen area with a cast iron stove. Doors led off to what Sophia assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean but clearly the domain of men who spent more time working than worrying about curtains or decorative touches. "I know it is not much," Owen said, sounding suddenly uncertain, "but it is solid and it is ours. You can change anything you like, add whatever makes you comfortable. I want you to feel like this is your home." Sophia turned to him, pulling off her gloves and coat. "Owen, I grew up in a 2-room apartment in Boston where we could hear every word the neighbors said through paper-thin walls. This is a palace by comparison, but more than that, it feels right. It feels like the home I have been searching for." Relief flooded his features. Yeah, she confirmed, stepping closer to him. "Now, I believe we are married, which means we should probably figure out how this is going to work. I do not want this to be just a business arrangement, Owen. I meant my vows. I want a real marriage." Owen's eyes darkened with an emotion that made her breath catch. "So did I." "Sophia, I have been alone for a long time and I have probably forgotten how to do this right, but I want to try. I want us to build something real together. Then we will figure it out together, she said, and rose on her toes to kiss him. This kiss was different from the chaste one at the ceremony. This was their first kiss as husband and wife in the privacy of their own home, and it held the promise of all the nights to come. Owen gathered her close, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed against her lower back, pulling her flush against him. Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck and let herself feel, let herself want, let herself hope that this leap of faith might turn into something extraordinary. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I should show you the rest of the house. The tour was brief. There were 2 bedrooms, one clearly Owen's with its simple furnishings and masculine touches, the other empty except for a bed frame. There was a root cellar, a pantry stocked with provisions, and even a small bathing room with a copper tub. I added that room 2 years ago, Owen admitted. My men thought I was crazy, but I was tired of bathing in a bucket. Never thought I would have a wife to share it with. That night, after a supper of stew and bread left by Owen's ranch hand, they navigated the awkwardness of their wedding night with more humor and tenderness than Sophia had dared hope for. Owen was patient and gentle, and while there were fumbling moments and nervous laughter, there was also genuine connection and the beginning of real intimacy. Afterward, lying in Owen's arms in the big bed that was now theirs, Sophia listened to the wind whistle around the eaves and felt more content than she had in years. This was not the life she had imagined growing up in Boston, but it was exactly the life she needed. What are you thinking about? Owen asked, his deep voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. That I am glad the blizzard brought me early, she said honestly. If it had not, we might have spent 3 days being awkward and nervous. Instead, we just jumped in and started living. She felt him smile against her hair. I was thinking the same thing. That storm was a blessing in disguise. The first weeks of marriage brought both joy and challenges. Sophia had to learn everything about ranch life from scratch, and there were days when she felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work involved. She woke before dawn to make breakfast for Owen, and whatever ranch hands were staying close to the house. She learned to churn butter, bake bread in the temperamental oven, preserve food, tend the vegetable garden that lay dormant under snow but would need planting come spring, and 100 other tasks that were second nature to women who had grown up in this life. But Owen was patient and encouraging, and his men were respectful and helpful. The foreman, a leathery old cowboy named Jack Sullivan, took it upon himself to teach Sophia about the animals and the ranch operation. He showed her which cattle were which, explained the seasonal rhythms of the work, and shared stories about Owen that made her understand her husband better. That man worked himself half to death after his parents died, Jack told her one afternoon while they were feeding the chickens Owen had surprised her with. Threw himself into the ranch because he did not want to feel the grief. I told him he needed to find himself a wife, someone to share the load and remind him that life is meant to be lived, not just endured. Glad he finally listened. Sophia appreciated these insights into Owen's character. Her husband was not naturally talkative about his feelings, but he showed his affection through actions. He made sure she always had enough firewood. He fixed things before she even noticed they were broken. He brought her wildflowers when he came home from checking the far pastures. He held her every night like she was something precious. And slowly, carefully, they fell in love. It was not a lightning bolt or a dramatic declaration. It was 1,000 small moments that accumulated into something powerful and enduring. It was Owen teaching her to ride a horse, his hand steady on her waist as he helped her mount. It was Sophia surprising him with his favorite apple cake and seeing his face light up like a child at Christmas. It was conversations by the fire in the evening when they shared their dreams and fears. It was the way they learned each other's bodies and hearts with equal care. By the time spring began to creep into the high country, melting the last of the blizzard snow and coaxing green shoots from the earth, Sophia could not imagine her life without Owen in it. She had found her home, her purpose, and her partner. One evening in late March, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Owen reached for her hand. "I need to tell you something." Sophia's heart jumped, worried by his serious tone. "What is it?" "I love you," he said simply. "I know we married as near strangers, and I know this was supposed to be a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became real for me. You are not just my wife, Sophia. You are my best friend, my partner, and the person I want to spend every day of the rest of my life with. I love you, and I needed you to know that." Tears blurred her vision as Sophia squeezed his hand. "I love you too. I think I started falling for you that first night when you carried buckets of hot water up the stairs so I could have a bath. You have been taking care of me, cherishing me, every day since. How could I not love you?" Owen pulled her into his arms, and they sat together as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. This was what Sophia had been searching for when she answered that mail-order bride advertisement. Not just a husband or a home, but love and belonging, and the sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The spring and summer passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Sophia planted a large garden and learned to preserve food for the winter. She sewed curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors, transforming the bachelor ranch house into a real home. She became friends with the wives of neighboring ranchers and the women in town, slowly building a community for herself in this wild place. Owen was busy with the cattle, the endless work of calving season, branding, and preparing for the long drives that would take their beef to market. But no matter how tired he was, he always made time for Sophia. They carved out moments of joy and connection amid the labor, whether it was a stolen kiss in the barn or a midnight conversation under the stars. In late August, Sophia woke feeling queasy and immediately knew. She spent the day in a daze of wonder and terror, trying to decide how to tell Owen that they were going to have a baby. That evening, she made his favorite supper and waited until he had eaten before gathering her courage. "Owen, I have something to tell you." He looked up from his coffee, his expression curious. "What is it?" "I am with child. We are going to have a baby probably sometime in early spring." For a moment, Owen just stared at her, his face unreadable. Then he was out of his chair and pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, there were tears on his cheeks. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Sophia asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Owen said, cupping her face in his hands. "You have given me everything, Sophia. A home, love, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Owen became almost comically protective, trying to prevent Sophia from doing any heavy work and fretting over her constantly. She found it endearing even when it was exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him regularly. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I can still cook dinner and gather eggs." "I know," Owen would say, "but you are carrying our child, and I will be damned if anything happens to either of you if I can prevent it." His devotion only made her love him more. This was the man she had traveled 2,000 miles to find, the partner she had dreamed of. They spent the long winter evenings preparing for the baby, with Owen building a cradle with his own hands while Sophia sewed tiny clothes and blankets. On a cold night in early March, almost exactly 1 year after Sophia had arrived in Springerville, the baby decided it was time. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Hayes from town. Owen paced outside the bedroom door like a caged animal, driving Jack and the other ranch hands crazy with his worry. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, a thin wail pierced the air. Dr. Hayes opened the door, grinning broadly. "Congratulations, Owen. You have a son." Owen nearly fell over in his rush to get into the room. Sophia lay in the bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. She looked up at him with so much love it made his chest ache. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Owen approached the bed like he was in a dream. Sophia pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, wisps of dark hair, and eyes that were trying to focus on this new world. The baby was perfect, impossibly small and fragile, and Owen felt his heart crack open in a way it never had before. "Can I hold him?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Sophia carefully transferred the baby into his arms, showing him how to support the head. Owen looked down at his son and felt the weight of responsibility and love settle over him like a mantle. This tiny person was depending on him and Sophia for everything. They would teach him, protect him, love him, and help him grow into a good man. "What should we name him?" Sophia asked. They had discussed names endlessly over the winter but had never quite settled on one. Now, holding his son, Owen knew exactly what felt right. "I was thinking Matthew. It was my father's middle name, Matthew Crawford." "Matthew," Sophia repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Matthew Crawford, welcome to the world." The baby chose that moment to let out another wail, and both new parents laughed through their tears. Dr. Hayes and Mrs. Patterson offered congratulations and instructions on caring for the newborn, then left the family alone to marvel at what they had created together. The months after Matthew's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Sophia had never been so tired in her life, but every time she looked at her son or caught Owen watching the baby with wonder in his eyes, she felt a bone-deep satisfaction. They were a family now, connected by love and blood and choice. Matthew was a good baby as babies went, though he had a set of lungs that could wake the dead when he wanted feeding. Owen took to fatherhood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He would get up with Sophia during the night feedings, sitting with her in the rocking chair he had built, talking softly about nothing and everything while their son nursed. He changed diapers without complaint, walked endless miles around the house soothing a fussy infant, and loved that baby with a fierceness that made Sophia fall in love with her husband all over again. As Matthew grew from an infant into a chubby, smiling baby who watched everything with curious dark eyes, life settled into new rhythms. The ranch work continued with its seasonal demands, but now it was punctuated by first smiles, first teeth, and first words. Owen brought Matthew out to see the horses and cattle as soon as the weather warmed, holding him securely while explaining everything about ranch life to an audience who mostly just gummed his shirt collar. "You are going to make him into a cowboy before he can even walk," Sophia teased one afternoon, watching from the porch as Owen showed their 8-month-old son a new calf. "Damn right I am," Owen called back, grinning at her. "This ranch will be his someday. He needs to know it inside and out." That evening, after Matthew had been put to bed and they finally had a moment to themselves, Owen pulled Sophia onto his lap in front of the fire. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving Boston, marrying a stranger, coming to this hard country?" Sophia twisted to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. Even after all this time, part of him still could not quite believe that she had chosen him, that she was happy. "Not for one single second," she said firmly. "This life is hard, yes. The work never ends, and some days I am so tired I could cry. But I have you and Matthew and a home where I belong. That is more than I ever dared dream of back in Boston. You gave me everything I needed, Owen Crawford." "You gave me everything first," he countered. "The day you stumbled out of that blizzard into my life, I got handed a miracle I did not deserve. I love you more than I have words for, Sophia." They kissed with the easy familiarity of partners who knew each other's hearts, then sat in comfortable silence watching the fire burn down to embers. This was their life now, built on chance and choice in equal measure. A mail-order bride delivered early by a historic blizzard. A lonely cowboy who saw the woman he had been waiting for and knew she was right on time. A love that grew from respect and hope into something unshakable. The years flowed past like the seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. Matthew grew into a bright, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere and adored his mother with a sweetness that made everyone who met him smile. When he was 2, Sophia found herself pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Emma Rose Crawford. The little girl had Sophia's red hair and Owen's dark eyes, and from her first day she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "I am completely outnumbered now," Owen would joke, holding his daughter while Matthew climbed all over him demanding attention. "Surrounded by people I would die for who think I exist solely to bring them cookies and pony rides." But he said it with such obvious joy that nobody believed he minded even a little. Owen Crawford had transformed from a lonely rancher into a devoted family man, and the change suited him right down to his bones. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Sophia proved to have a head for numbers and took over the bookkeeping, finding ways to save money and increase profits that impressed even the experienced Jack. She also started raising chickens in earnest, selling eggs and birds in town for extra income. Together, she and Owen were building something lasting, a legacy to pass on to their children. When Matthew was 5 and Emma 3, Sophia suggested they should have a proper anniversary celebration. It had been 6 years since that blizzard had brought her to Springerville early, 6 years since Owen had said she was right on time, and she wanted to mark the occasion. "We could go into town for dinner at the hotel," she suggested. "Mrs. Patterson would love to watch the children for an evening, and we have not had time alone together in ages." Owen agreed readily, and on a warm June evening they dressed in their best clothes and drove into Springerville in the wagon. The town had grown over the years, with new buildings and more people, but it still had the frontier charm that Sophia had come to love. The hotel dining room was full of people who called out greetings and congratulations on their anniversary. After all these years, Sophia was no longer the mail-order bride who had arrived in a blizzard. She was Mrs. Crawford, a respected member of the community, and Springerville was truly home. Over dinner, they reminisced about their first days together, laughing at how awkward and uncertain they had been. "I was so nervous when you walked into that saloon," Owen admitted. "I took one look at you and thought, she's going to take one look at me and get back on that stagecoach. You were this pretty lady from Boston, and I was just a rough cowboy with dirt under his nails. I thought you were the most handsome man I had ever seen," Sophia countered. "And when you said I was right on time, I felt like maybe I had finally found where I belonged." "You belonged with me," Owen said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "From the very first moment, you belonged with me. I knew it even if I was too scared to admit it." They talked long into the evening, celebrating not just their anniversary but the life they had built together. When they finally returned to the ranch to collect their sleeping children from Mrs. Patterson, Sophia felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path that had brought her to this place and this man. Time continued its steady march forward. Matthew started school in town, riding in each day with other ranch children, and coming home full of stories about his lessons. Emma proved to be a bold, adventurous child who was determined to do everything her older brother could do, much to Owen's amusement and occasional terror. "She is going to give me gray hair," he complained after finding 4-year-old Emma attempting to climb onto a horse by herself. "She has absolutely no fear." "She gets that from you," Sophia pointed out. "Matthew is cautious and thoughtful like me, but Emma is all you. Brave and stubborn and convinced she can conquer the world." When Matthew was 8 and Emma 6, Sophia gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas. Unlike his siblings, Thomas was a quiet, observant baby who seemed content to watch the chaos of family life unfold around him. Owen joked that at least one of their children had some common sense. Life was full and busy and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also deeply satisfying. Sophia had the family and home she had always wanted, and Owen had transformed from a lonely man into the center of a loving household. They had their fights and frustrations, because no marriage is perfect, but they always talked things through and remembered that they were partners in this life. The children grew, and the ranch prospered, and the seasons turned. Matthew developed a love for the cattle and the land, clearly preparing to follow in his father's footsteps. Emma discovered a talent for training horses that impressed even the most experienced hands. Thomas was still young, but he showed signs of being a scholar, preferring books to barnyard work. "We made good kids," Owen said one evening, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. He and Sophia were sitting on the porch, taking a rare moment of peace. "They are growing up strong and happy." "We did," Sophia agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember when you used to think you would grow old alone on this ranch?" "I remember," Owen said softly. "I remember being so lonely I ached with it. And then a blizzard brought you to me 3 days early and my whole life changed. Best thing that ever happened to me, that storm." "Best thing that ever happened to me too," Sophia said. "I used to think I was brave for answering your advertisement and traveling west, but the real bravery was yours, opening your heart to a stranger and trusting that we could build something together." Owen turned to kiss her, his hand cupping her cheek in the familiar, tender gesture that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "We did not just build something together. We built everything together." As the years continued to pass, that truth became more evident. Their children grew into fine young people who loved the ranch and each other. Matthew stayed on to work the land alongside his father, eventually bringing home a wife of his own and starting the next generation of Crawfords. Emma married a horse trainer and settled on a nearby ranch, visiting frequently and keeping everyone entertained with her bold personality. Thomas went to college in the East to become a teacher, but he came home every summer and never lost his love for the land where he had been raised. Owen and Sophia grew older together, their hair going gray and their hands becoming weathered by years of hard work. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with time, like a well-aged wine. They had built a life together from nothing but hope and determination, and it had become something extraordinary. On their 20th anniversary, Owen surprised Sophia with a gift he had been secretly working on for months. He led her out to the spot where the old barn used to stand before they had replaced it with a larger structure. There, he had built a gazebo overlooking the valley, a place where they could sit together and watch the sunset over the land they loved. "I wanted you to have a special place," he explained as Sophia stared at the beautiful structure with tears in her eyes. "A place that is just ours, where we can come and remember how this all started. 20 years ago, a blizzard brought you to me early, and I said you were right on time." "I have never meant anything more than I meant those words, Sophia. You were right on time then, and you have been right on time every day since." Sophia threw her arms around her husband, holding him tight while happy tears streamed down her face. "I love you, Owen Crawford. I loved you when I was a nervous mail-order bride. I loved you when we were new parents trying to figure everything out. And I love you now, more than ever. You are my home and my heart." They stood there together in their gazebo, looking out over the ranch that had been built by their combined efforts, and they were content. This was what love looked like after 20 years. Not the wild passion of new romance, but something steadier and more enduring. A partnership forged in the Wild West, tested by hardship and blessed by joy, that would last until their final days. The seasons continued to turn, and Owen and Sophia continued to face them together. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation while also enjoying the freedom that came with being able to hand the children back to their parents when they got too rowdy. They watched their ranch change and grow, adapting to new times while still maintaining the core values they had established. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration that lasted 3 days. Children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter, and neighbors came from miles around to honor the couple who had become pillars of the community. There was food and music and dancing, and stories told about the mail-order bride who had arrived in a historic blizzard, and the cowboy who had known she was right on time. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left and the younger children had been put to bed, Owen and Sophia slipped away to their gazebo. The night was clear and cool, with stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. They sat close together on the bench Owen had built, wrapped in a shared blanket, and reflected on the quarter-century they had spent together. "I used to wonder what my life would look like," Sophia said softly. "When I was young in Boston, I imagined all sorts of futures. But I never imagined anything as good as this. You gave me everything, Owen. A home, children, love, purpose. You gave me a life worth living." "You did the same for me," Owen replied, his arm tight around her shoulders. "I was just existing before you came. Going through the motions, working the ranch, surviving. You taught me how to actually live, how to love, how to be part of something bigger than myself. That blizzard that brought you early was not just good luck, Sophia. It was fate. The universe making sure we found each other." "You really think so?" "I know so," Owen said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be, and we were one of them. From the moment you stumbled out of that storm and into my life, I knew. You were mine and I was yours, and that was all there was to it." Sophia tilted her face up to kiss him, a long, sweet kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership and unwavering commitment. When they pulled apart, she smiled at him in the starlight. "Then I am glad the universe intervened. I am glad that blizzard came early and the stagecoach could not go any further and you were there to pull me out of the storm. I am glad for every single thing that led me to you." "And I said it then, and I will say it again now," Owen murmured against her hair. "You were right on time." They sat in their gazebo long into the night, holding each other close and watching the stars wheel overhead. Around them, their family slept peacefully in the house they had built together. The cattle were safe in the valley below. The land stretched out in all directions, wild and beautiful and home. This was the life they had created from nothing but faith and hope and love. A mail-order bride and a lonely cowboy who had taken a chance on each other and built something that would last for generations. It had not always been easy, and there had been sorrows along with the joys, but they had faced everything together and emerged stronger for it. As the night deepened and the air grew colder, they finally stood to return to the house. Walking hand in hand across the yard, Owen and Sophia Crawford looked like what they were: two people who had found their other half and never let go. The blizzard that had brought them together was long past, fading into legend and family stories told to grandchildren. But its impact remained, visible in every corner of the ranch, every member of their family, every moment of the life they shared. Years continued to pass, as they always do. Owen and Sophia grew old together, their steps slower but their love undiminished. They watched their children have children, and those children grow up to have children of their own. The ranch passed to Matthew and his family, but Owen and Sophia remained at the heart of it all, the foundation upon which everything else was built. On a warm spring evening in their 43rd year of marriage, Sophia and Owen sat once more in their gazebo. They were both in their 70s now, their bodies worn by decades of hard work, but their spirits still strong. The valley below was green with new grass, and cattle grazed peacefully in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in the house behind them, their grandchildren were laughing over supper, the sounds of family filling the air. "It has been a good life," Sophia said, leaning against Owen's shoulder. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best life," Owen agreed. "And it all started with a blizzard and a woman brave enough to travel 2,000 miles to marry a stranger." "And a man brave enough to open his heart to her," Sophia added. "Do not sell yourself short, Owen Crawford. You made me fall in love with you, and then you kept me in love every day after." "We did it together," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "Everything we did together. That was the secret, I think. Not trying to do it all alone, but being willing to share the load and the joy with someone else." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together in peaceful contentment. They had lived a full life, rich with love and family and purpose. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. They had built something lasting and good, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. "I love you," Sophia whispered. "I have loved you for 43 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "I love you too," Owen replied. "From the moment you walked into that saloon covered in snow to right now, and every moment in between. You were right on time then, and you are right on time now. You always have been, always will be." They watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, sitting close together the way they had for more than 4 decades. The Wild West they had known was changing, growing tamer and more civilized with each passing year. But here on this ranch, in this moment, they could still feel the spirit of those early days when everything was new and uncertain and full of possibility. This was their happily ever after, earned through years of hard work and mutual devotion. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. A real life, fully lived, with all its complications and compromises and transcendent joys. A mail-order bride and a cowboy who had taken a chance on love and never looked back. As the night deepened and the air grew cool, they stood to return to the house once more. Their steps were slower now, but they still walked hand in hand, still leaned on each other for support, both physical and emotional. Inside, their family waited, generations of love springing from that first meeting in a blizzard all those years ago. Owen held the door for Sophia, ushering her into the warmth and light of their home. Before following her inside, he paused for just a moment, looking out at the land one more time. The valley was dark now, but he knew every inch of it by heart. This was his legacy, his life's work, made possible by the woman who had arrived 3 days early in the middle of a historic storm. Smiling to himself, Owen Crawford closed the door and went inside to join his family, his heart full of gratitude for every moment of the extraordinary life he had been blessed to live. The blizzard had brought his mail-order bride early, and he had told her she was right on time. 43 years later, he knew those words had never been truer. She had arrived at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place, and together they had created something beautiful that would endure long after they were both gone. In the warmth of the house, surrounded by the family they had built together, Owen and Sophia Crawford lived out their final years in contentment and joy, secure in the knowledge that their love story would be told and retold by their descendants for generations to come. It was a story worth telling, about courage and faith and the transformative power of love, about a blizzard that changed 2 lives forever, about a mail-order bride who was brave enough to travel into the unknown, and a cowboy who was wise enough to recognize his future when it stumbled out of a snowstorm and into his arms.